All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Gilroy, and I am the manager of Temporary Solutions. We welcome you to our second ever webinar. We had our first webinar yesterday on this same topic, and we had about 140 participants, and we got a lot of good feedback and questions from them yesterday. So we are going to make sure that we incorporate some of their comments and questions into our webinar today. We are also recording this webinar so that we can publish it probably on our website. We will let you know where to find the recorded webinar once we have it prepared and posted. But we are recording this so that you can refer back to it at your convenience, or if you any other HR contacts or billing administrators within your agency. As you should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation on your screen. Our finance section supervisor, April Carden, is going to be driving that today. Before we get started, we have currently almost 100 participants. So in the interest of keeping the presentation on track, what we are going to ask you to do is we're going to keep everybody on mute for the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, instead of unmuting yourself and asking over the air here, we're going to ask you to key in your questions in the chat box found at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you don't see a chat box down there, you can actually hover over the PowerPoint presentation slide, and there should be a little chat bubble there. If you click on that, there is a there's a chat line, and then there's a Q&A line, and we're going to ask you to open up the Q&A line by clicking on the arrow next to Q&A so that it expands out. And Kelsey Sellender, who is our assistant manager, is going to be monitoring that Q&A box. So I'll go through my portion of the presentation, and you can be asking any questions you have during that period of time. She's going to keep track of those. And then when I finish up, Kelsey is going to jump on and read off those questions for me to answer. The same will happen once Anita Ward and April Carden get on to talk about QuickBooks. And what we'll do as well is we'll get all those questions and answers together, and we will publish those along with the webinar once that's ready. So if you hear a pause on my side, it's because I'm referring to notes, so I'll ask for your patience on that. April, I see you've pulled up the agenda. If you'll go ahead and click through that there. As you can see here, we're going to go through two topics. The first is going to be timekeeping, and as you can see there, we're going to go through an overview of our current time administration processes, as well as an overview of our changes and why they're needed. We're going to talk about how this affects temporary employees as well as the agencies. Then we're going to go into a discussion about our transition to QuickBooks for customer invoicing. Again, we'll go through the current process, and we'll discuss the new process and why those changes are needed. We're going to preview our new invoice in QuickBooks. We'll also discuss some of the more significant changes to the invoice and to our process, and suggest some practices for you to work with those invoices. All right, April, if you'll advance ahead, please. So just briefly, some of our goals and objectives for our presentation today. As you can see there, we want to inform our agency partners of changes to employee timekeeping and customer invoicing. Really the overarching objective here, which is covered in the bullets, is that we want to be on the same page with everybody. We want to provide you with important status updates. We want to preview these new features so you know exactly what to expect. If we have to refer to these changes in future communications, either via email or if you call with questions, we want everybody to know the same terminology that we're using. So this is really a chance for us to bring y'all up to speed on where we are. As I said earlier, we want to answer your questions during this webinar. And if we don't have the answers to your questions today, we want to follow up in communication later on through that FAQ document that I spoke about earlier, as well as just keeping the lines of communication open between us and all of you. And then, of course, we just want to make this a very collaborative effort. Y'all are our customers, and so we want to make sure that we are serving all of your needs so that y'all can do your jobs and we can do ours. April, if you'll go ahead and advance. So again, 3 presenters today. Again, I'm Joe Gilroy, Manager of Temporary Solutions. I'll be covering the timekeeping portion of the presentation today. Then we're going to switch it over after that to Anita Ward. She is our Chief Information Officer for OSHR. And April Carden, who's our new Finance Section Supervisor. Some of you may have worked with PJ Warren in the past. She was our previous Finance Section Supervisor. April has taken her place with PJ's retirement. So we welcome April on board. So with that, I think we're going to go right into the meat of the presentation here. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the elimination of 6-2 numbers. With our transition to QuickBooks, we're going to be eliminating our 6-2 position numbers, and I'll give you all some background on what that is if you're not familiar with it. So all of us as state employees have a position number in Beacon. For a lot of folks, it starts with 600 or 6500. Temporary employees also have position numbers just like those. But at Temporary Solutions, we assign a second position number, a supplemental position number to those individuals, and we refer to those as 6-2 numbers. So again, each worker employed through Temporary Solutions has a 6-2 number. And April, if you go to the next screen, the 6-2 number is tied to an info type in Beacon called the 554 info type. It's the hourly rate per assignment. And most of you out there do not have an IT 554 on your Beacon profile. But this is what it looks like here. I've blacked out some of the sensitive information on there. But what it does is it allows us to identify this person as a Temporary Solutions employee, and it also allows us to communicate our internal HR management system with Beacon. And April, I think there's some notes on that on the following slide. This is what the time entry profile looks like in Cat 2 for those of you who are time administrators. The 6-2 position number goes into that position box right there. If you're a Temporary Solutions temporary, it'll appear on your timesheet in ESS as a box that says position. That's where the 6-2 number is keyed in. And then you see the rest of the week there for folks to key in their time. I just wanted to give you this visual here in Cat 2. Go ahead and advance. Okay, go ahead. Again, as I mentioned, the 6-2 number allows us primarily to link our Temp Wizard HR management system with the HR payroll system, formerly called Beacon, primarily for customer invoicing. So what it does is the employee keys in their 6-2 number whenever they enter in their time. When the pay period ends and the employee has been paid, we pull a report out of Temp Wizard and import it into the HR payroll system. The HR payroll system identifies all the 6-2 numbers and associates them with the Temporary Solutions employee. It takes the number of hours that the Temporary Solutions employee worked during that pay period, and it multiplies it by the billing rate. And this is how your Temp Solutions invoice is generated. So it's really based on a time model. The 6-2 number and the IT 0554 info type had one other side benefit, and that was that it enabled dual assignments. So some of your temporaries through Temp Solutions may have had a dual assignment prior to March 2020. And this is when a temporary employee had a primary position with one agency or one program, and they worked at another one as well. So they may have had 20 hours working for DHHS, say, and 20 hours working for agriculture, we would have considered that a dual assignment. With our transition to QuickBooks, which you're going to hear about in just a little bit, we're going to be delimiting the IT 554. So dual assignments had to end. They were going to end already. Since we weren't quite sure when we were going to transition to QuickBooks earlier this year, we had to pick a date to discontinue dual assignments. So we had, this was back in January, I believe, we decided to go ahead and do it in March to give folks on dual assignment plenty of time to pick which assignment they wanted to keep. So as of now, dual assignments have been discontinued. The 554 info type created a tremendous administrative burden. While it allowed the two systems to talk and it allowed dual assignments, it also required a lot of on temporary solution side, on OSC side, and then also with the temporary employee. We had to create the 62 numbers for all of those individuals, all temporary solutions employees. We had to distribute that information to the temp. We had to put that information into Beacon. OSC had to run regular reports on the 554 info type. And then, of course, the temporary solutions employee had to remember that 62 number and also key it onto their timesheet. So it was just a lot of work to make billing happen. As I said, the 554 will be delimited with the launch of QuickBooks. We are going to notify the agencies when that is going to happen. It looks like it'll happen toward the end of June, but we're going to let you all know first so that, again, that we're all on the same page with that information. We're going to follow up our communication with you with an email out to all temporary solutions temporaries to let them know that the 62 number is no longer needed. Temporaries who key their time into ESS directly, they won't have the option of keying a 62 number. That field will disappear from their timesheet. April. So as I mentioned, a late June to early July at the latest implementation on that. So a fact that y'all may not know is that we have about 3,500 employees on biweekly payroll for temporary solutions. Of those 3,500, about 2,500 of them still submit paper timesheets. In order to manage that workload on a biweekly pay schedule, we have 3 employees constantly working on timekeeping. So we have 1 full-time and 2 temporary employees serving as timekeepers. It takes them a tremendous amount of time to get payroll processed, especially when you consider that they've got finalization dates that they have to keep in mind. It takes about 3 or 4 days in order to key in all paper timesheets. And again, that's every 2 weeks. Our timekeepers follow up keying in that time with an audit of the time that they've keyed in to make sure there has been no human error or duplication of information or anything like that. They also have to go in and make sure that the time entries that our temps key directly into ESS are also correct. So again, it takes well over a week to make sure that we meet finalization, and again, it's just sort of an administrative burden to implement that. Of course, we're happy to provide that service to y'all. Y'all pay a $2 administrative charge per temporary hour of time worked. But when it comes to efficiencies, those sort of outweigh the benefits in our opinion. Down there at the bottom of the screen, I've listed several critical challenges to the paper timesheet process. The first one is the visibility of time records. If you think about it, if we receive a paper timesheet from a temporary employee on Monday, but we're not able to key that timesheet into the system until, say, Thursday because we have 2,500 to go through, there's not going to be a whole lot of visibility of that person's timesheet for at least 4 days. So if y'all are in need of a report or you would like to know how much a person is going to be paid or whether they're going to be paid, we have to go through the paper timesheets, either physically or through the inbox that we receive them in to find that one paper timesheet. If that temporary had his or her time keyed directly into ESS, either by the temp himself or by a time administrator, that record is going to be visible right away. Secondly, paper timesheets affect the accessibility of our own staff members. So again, when it takes 3 or 4 days to keep paper timesheets in and another 3 or 4 days to audit paper timesheets, it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for those timekeepers to go through emails to respond to payroll issues and other non-time questions. Beth Van Pol, who I'm sure a lot of you know of, she is someone who he's in the majority, if not all, of those paper timesheets. And so it's difficult for her to manage the payroll side of her position when timekeeping is such a priority. Third, unprocessed employees, and this is something else that several of you may have experienced here recently. When we receive a paper timesheet, employee who say has been working for 2 weeks, we receive their paper timesheet, we go to key in their time into the beacon system, and we get a hard stop because they haven't been there. We'll go back and we'll look to see why that employee has not been entered. And a lot of times it's because the employee has started back to work without us being notified by the agency that that's occurred, or that employee has not turned in their onboarding paperwork, so we haven't been able to process their payroll action. It's frustrating for an employee, and it's really frustrating for everybody, I understand, when this happens. So we were interested in eliminating this challenge of having a person's paper timesheet sitting in a pile and us not realizing for 3 or 4 days that that person is not yet in the payroll system. So again, we want to move in a different direction so that we can address these challenges. April? So we started to think about why we receive so many paper timesheets. And short of sending out a survey, we just decided to look internally because we thought it might be some of our own messaging or processes that was driving this. We thought that maybe the 2,500 people who are using paper timesheets don't have an NCID in order to do that. So we did some digging and we found actually that the vast majority of those 2,500 actually do have an NCID. In fact, it's upwards of 90%. So we again started to think about the reasons since the NCID one wasn't correct. And we thought, well, it could be because those temporaries may not have access to a computer. Their supervisor may not have access to a computer. Their supervisor may not have an NCID or access to MSS. Started, again, looking a little bit deeper into this, and we realized that it's sort of our policy that the agencies decide whether the employee was going to be assigned an NCID. And if you go to the next screen, you'll see what I'm talking about here. When you submit a job order request on tab number 9 for recommendation, if you have a recommended candidate, we ask a question, would you like Temporary Solutions to establish an NCID? And you have the option of checking yes or no. When you check yes, we set up an NCID for that individual, and we've got complete visibility of who has an NCID. When you check no, it was our assumption that that employee was not getting an NCID. Then, of course, we realized that, well, most of these folks have email addresses, so most of them must have NCIDs because you have to have an NCID in order to have an email address. But with that lack of visibility as to who had an NCID outside of the ones issued by OSHR, we sort of had to default to the process of receiving paper timesheets. So April, if you'll go on to the next screen. And the paper timesheet sort of, again, became our default or de facto method of timekeeping. We didn't think that we had the ability to encourage or require temporaries to key in their time through ESS, because again, we just didn't have the visibility of whether they had an NCID. Now that we know so many temporary employees have an NCID, we're going to change our timekeeping strategy a bit. Instead of equipping temporaries to rely really on paper timesheets during our onboarding sessions and then during our communication to them when they first start with us. We're going to change our strategy to enable and encourage direct entry through ESS where possible. Now, again, we realize that there are reasons why a temporary employee may not key their time directly into ESS. Again, it could be that their supervisor isn't able to approve it. It could be that they don't have a computer, alternate timekeeping systems, etc. But for those employees that do have that capability, we are going to do everything we can to help them key it in. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to assign NCIDs, establish NCID accounts for any temporaries through temporary solutions that don't currently have an NCID. We're also going to update our job order page so that agencies can be more clear about what their plans are for NCIDs. We'll spell out the question, will the agency be establishing an NCID, or should temporary solutions do that? And that is going to help direct our communication to the temporary employee. If the agency is going to set it up for them, then we will provide that employee with job aids on how to access ESS through the online portal, or on how to key their time through the SAP Fiori timekeeping app. We will incur the cost of any NCID accounts that we set up. For any NCID accounts that the agencies will pay that cost. And again, the reason why an agency would want to do that is so that they can issue an email address to that employee. Email addresses, if you want an employee to have an email address for your agency, and you want to add that person to mail lists for your agency, such as agency all or division all, their email address has to have your agency's extension on it. And in order to do that, their NCID has to be issued by that agency as well. The other thing that we're going to do to, again, encourage direct entry in ESS is we are going to email job aids to all temporary solutions, temporaries in the coming weeks. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to include job aids on ESS. It's going to include directions on how to get into the portal or into the SAP Fiori app. We're going to customize this communication to them so that it is, temporary solution specific. There are still going to be, as I said, occasions when an employee is going to need a paper timesheet, such as during their first payroll cycle with us as we get them into the payroll system. But we want to make sure that when they get their NCID through the agency or through temporary solutions, they have all the information they need in order to time into ESS. Our time frame on this, again, is from late June to early July, and that's to get the NCID accounts established for those 100 or 200 individuals that need them, and also to communicate out those job aids to the temporary employees. What our plan is to make sure that the agencies are equipped to assume the responsibility of all of those time entries. So we'll speak to that in the next slide here. So as y'all know, time approval is the agency's responsibility. Temporary employees, again, either or through ESS, they key in their time and they release it to their supervisor. We've always said that it's the agency's responsibility to make sure that the supervisor is approving that time so that we can be sure that the temporary employee is paid. So with that, we don't want to now enable and encourage 2,500 new temporary employees using ESS to go on and do that without giving the agencies the resources that they need to make sure that that time can get approved. So, our preference is that the supervisor approves the time, but in the event that that's not possible for any of the reasons that I explained earlier, we're going to give the agencies the ability to review, approve, and administer that time. Here recently, we contacted each of the agencies and also distributed a Microsoft Forms document that asked each of the agencies who they would like to administer the division level time of these temporary employees. So what we did was we created what are called customer org units. And if you're not familiar with this part, we had time, all of our positions in temporary solutions were organized at the agency level. So I've given an example there. All agriculture positions within temporary solutions were organized under the org unit TEMP SOL agriculture. So if we needed to give time rights to any employee in agriculture, say at the division level, we would have to give them access to the entire agency because, again, it was grouped by the agency org unit. What we've gone and done is created about 400 child customer org units. And these go all the way down to the customer level within the agency. So I've given another example here. Instead of just TEMP-SOL agriculture, we now have TS agriculture NCFS for the North Carolina Forest Service. So the North Carolina Forest Service time administrators will now have the ability to access just NCFS temporary solutions temporaries in Beacon because we will have the ability to give them access to just that org unit. For you agency time administrators, we have kept the parent or the TEMP SOL agriculture in this case. We've kept the parent org units in place so that if you used to have access to that parent org unit, you still do access to it, but you need access to it, we can give you access to that whole parent org unit. Again, this will enable each of the divisions to be able to review and approve and administer time as those 2,500 or so new users begin keying their time into ESS. The status of this part of the project is that we have submitted our security change request to OSC to grant the agency's access to TS customer org units. That request went over earlier in the week, and we spoke with the OSC this morning, and they said that request is in process right now. So you should be hearing back from us in mid-June, so in the next week or so, to be notified that you now have access to your requested temporary solutions org unit. You can advance on, April. So depending on your assigned time role, again, you'll be able to display, approve, or maintain time for TS temporaries. That'll be done in CATS DA for time display. It'll be through CAT2 for time maintenance, and it'll be through CATS Approve Lite for time approval. So you'll see all of the same screens that you're used to seeing in those functions. However, again, you'll have access to the temporary solutions org units for that. If there are any representatives on from Commerce today, you'll actually have a different view, and so will your temporaries. Employment Security and Workforce Solutions need the ability to enter in charge objects, so we're going to make sure that y'all have the ability to do that. And then for any other agency that needs to be able to key in charge objects, we can make that function happen for you as well in the new with this new process. If you need that functionality, and I'm thinking about the Forest Service specifically, I know there are others, emergency management, please send an email to Kelsey Sellender, and she will be happy to communicate that need to OSC. So with access into CAT2 and CATS DA and CATS Approved Lite, you'll also have the ability to access time reports in BobJ for those temporary solutions org units. You'll also have the ability to quote unquote run reports in the time transactions such as CATS DA if you wanted to run it for the entire org unit. That'll be helpful, especially for time reporting for, say, FFCRA and CDE. As y'all know, we have a requirement right now to report on why people are using FFCRA and CDE leave, and also, how much leave those individuals are using. So you'll be able to run those transactions directly in Beacon yourselves. This will also help you ensure compliance with your agency's time management policies. So it could be that your agency requires that time is entered and approved by, say, noon on Monday or 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. You'll be able to run catch DA reports or time leveling reports to see who all still needs to key in their time in accordance with your own time management policies. For our billing contacts out there, here's a bullet I'm sure you'll all be happy with. You'll be able to reconcile invoices to the time entries. We get a lot of requests for timesheets so that invoices can be reconciled to those time entries. You'll be able to go right into the system for the time period you're trying to pay and see those time entries directly in there. Maybe most importantly, you'll be able to ensure that temporaries are paid on time. I'm going to take this opportunity to give a big shout out to y'all. We had a pretty significant problem, about, I would say, 8 to 10 months ago, where a lot of temporaries weren't being paid on time because the supervisors were not approving that time by finalization. And through a lot of just messaging through HRDs and CFOs and just directly to HR representatives, we've been able to turn that around on a grand scale. We are now only seeing just a handful, 2 or 3 temporaries each payroll period, who are not paid or are underpaid because their time was not released or approved before finalization. So, this may help us, bring that occurrence rate down to 0. So that would be really, I think, encouraging not only for the agencies, but of course for the temporaries as well. One big thing I want to stress is that last bullet here. The accessibility of this information in Beacon on these reports and on these time transactions is going to increase with the amount of temporaries that are participating in direct entry. So this goes back to the collaboration comment I made earlier. We want to enable temporaries to key into ESS. We want to enable all of you to be able to review and approve that time in Beacon. And so the more participation we have in that, the better the data is going to be for you to run those FFCRA and CDE reports, or to determine your compliance with timekeeping policies. So we really ask for your help in getting this information out there. April? I'll give just a quick summary of the timekeeping changes here before turning it over to Kelsey for Q&A. First, temporary solutions time entries will no longer include a 6-2 number. And again, that implementation will be in late June to early July. We are going to communicate that news out to temporary employees, again, in the coming weeks through an email. Temporary employees will not see the field for entering 6-2 numbers on their timesheet, and that view will also not, the position view will also not be available to time administrators keying the time in for those individuals. The view is just going to completely go away. Second, we're going to be encouraging temporary solutions temporaries to use ESS for direct time entry in the HR payroll system. Again, that communication is going to go out in late June to early July. We're going to provide them with customized communication to include job aids on direct entry into ESS, how to use the SAP Fiori app. There's a QR code that comes with getting into that app, so we're going to provide that to them. We'll give them instructions on how to get into the online portal. One thing I didn't mention is we'll also give them contact information for our NCID administrators at Temp Solutions. So if we have issued the NCID, then we'll be able to troubleshoot those questions. We'll actually be able to troubleshoot general questions from any NCID user. We just won't be able to get into the profile or unlock the NCID for any individual that we haven't assigned that NCID for. But we want to be of greatest service to our temporaries and to the employing agencies. Third, we're going to enable the use of ESS by assigning an NCID to any temporary without one. We've identified, again, 100 to 200 current Temp Solutions temps that do not have an NCID. We're going to create those accounts and pay for them. If during the course of that temporary's employment, y'all want to give that person an email address, you will have to take on their NCID account. So that'll, obviously come at the monthly cost. But if an email address is not needed, we'll be happy to maintain that account for them. That is going to happen in late June to early July, and it's actually going to coincide with the previous communication about keying time into ESS. And then fourth, we're going to the agencies to display, approve, and maintain time by granting access to these newly created customer org units. That request is happening right now with OSC, and we anticipate it will be completed in mid-June. So I know I've gone through a lot of information here. Hopefully it wasn't too fast. I wanted to make sure we were respectful of your time. But if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A box on the chat, and we'll be happy to take those.
At the end of this webinar, there will be an FAQ section in order for you to see all questions that were asked.
Hi, this is Anita, and April is driving the slides. I did want to mention that I do see a question that's about invoices, and I think with this part of the presentation, that question will be answered. So what we thought would be a good idea is to show a high-level view of the current process, and then we'll have another slide to show what's changing, because many people know, one piece of the process, but maybe not the whole picture. So just at a very high level, the HR contact initiates the internal request to hire a temporary. They get approval for the funding, and then they submit the job order. The job order comes to Temporary Solutions, and they process that job order by either onboarding a candidate that's been, a named candidate, or they do the recruitment process. Once they have a candidate to hire, the employee completes the onboarding paperwork. The supervisor approves the employee to work, and then the employee is hired into the HR payroll system. And as Joe spoke about, in detail, the NCID would be issued and strongly encouraged for ESS time entry and access. And then, of course, the employee works, and they key their time, or perhaps it's keyed by a time administrator. And once the time has been approved in HR payroll, then the time evaluation process will pick that up and pass it to payroll, and the employee will be paid. And after the time evaluation and payroll process is run, we receive a time file from HR payroll. So we don't currently receive payroll information, we receive time information. And what we do with that time information is we bring it into the current system, which is called Temp Wizard. That current system has to do a lot of calculations on that time based on just how that system works. It's time driven versus payroll driven. And of course, there is that administrative service charge. So the hours are important. But, I'm even just thinking about now with COVID-19 and all the different types of leave and so forth, it's a challenge keeping up with all those changes. So, but today, those invoices then are generated out of Temp Wizard, and they are distributed by email to the billing contacts, and that ends the process at a very high level. And then if you go to the next slide, everything up into after payroll is pretty much the same process, other than we are trying to move more people, of course, to ESS, and Joe talked about all the other improvements. But the big difference in the way we're doing the invoices is instead of receiving time file, file of all the time entries that were made and evaluated, we receive the actual payroll results from the wage type report. So we will receive all of the details of what was posted to the accounting system for all the different types of pay, all of the different employer expenses, any retroactive calculations, any adjustments like that. We receive all of those, the amounts, the pay period and so forth, that, for what, the for period, the end period, when it was posted, all that good stuff. So we are able to bring that into QuickBooks and generate the invoices based on those actual payments made. And then we will still push the invoices out to be paid, but we will push them out to our customer portal. So if you'll go to the next slide. So the changes with the invoices, as Joe talked about the new org units for each customer and it being much more granular down to program areas, division levels. However, it was deemed necessary for the amount of billing contacts and so forth. So it's many more customer accounts. And what we have done is we tie the personnel number to the customer account because we know which org units the employees are working in, and that comes through on the wage type reporter. So since we get all that information, we can put all of it on one invoice. And so you can see that it's combining the Medicare taxes, the administrative service charge, regular hours, FICA, and all of that on one invoice, including the high deductible health plan, employer costs. And rather than having the employee rate have the FICA and administrative service charge blended in, those are now broken out onto separate line items. So you can see exactly what the charges are for. And of course, on this screen, we have grayed out the employee name and the pay type, but we are including the personnel number in the front of that pay type so that you can easily, if you need to look that employee up, you'll have that information. You go to the next slide, please, April. So a little bit more about the invoices and the customer portal. So the invoices will be stored in the customer portal. We'll push those over into the folders based on your temporary solutions or unit. Any other documents that we may want to store over there to share will be placed in those folders as well, such as customer statements, credit memos, reports, as Joe spoke about. What will happen is when documents land in your folder, you'll get an email notification to let you know that there's new documents available. We're also going to have a star or some other indicator next to the folders so that you'll also be able to visually see when there's something new there. These will be your folders, so you'll be able to add subfolders underneath your customer folder if you want to organize your documents or in a certain way, that you'll have the capability of doing that. And let me just go over there and give a demo of that. See if I can. Yeah, you may have to give me control or make me presenter, April.
All right, just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and try now.
All right. So this is our new customer portal, which will be going live a few weeks. When you come in, you have this main area here will take you to see the invoices and the job order status. I want to point out before I move off of that, that when you're in SharePoint, this little waffle over here, you will take you to all your SharePoint sites. What you're following and what's really handy. So I would suggest when you do first come in, if you don't have a star up here that you're following it, you'll want to go ahead and follow it, and that'll make it easier for you to get to. We'll have job aids available. They'll all be here. This will take you over to the job order request form, and then the separations and the extensions form. We'll also have contact information for the temporary solutions staff, and then any events and announcements and things like that will all be here on this one portal. So now I'm going to go over to the invoices and job order status. And what we'll have here is a folder for each agency. And for those agencies that are very, very granular, we could even break it down further by the separate divisions. But I'm just going to go in Department of Agriculture real quick. I haven't built all of them yet, but just so that you can see that it'll have the org unit name and number there. So it's easily identifiable either way. And then the job order status. Now, currently this list is showing all job order status, but it will be narrowed down to where you'll only see your job orders, and it'll just give you a view of, where those job orders are in the process. Back here, I just wanted to come into Office of State Human Resources. So, we just have the three. I think there's a way to expand that. The other one was expanded out. Yeah. And if I go into the Learning Development Center, one of the customer folders, then you can see that I have some documents out here and that I can view. In this case, here's the payroll calendar. I didn't really want to show an invoice because I have to black things out. And another thing I think that may be helpful, and I'll send this to Kelsey, but I was thinking is we had all the questions about the org units. I just wanted to give you a quick view from this Beacon report of just how many org units we're talking about and how granular it gets. So, as Kelsey said, anybody that has any questions about this, she can answer those questions, but I did want to point that out. So that is, let's see, we go back. That is our customer portal, which we're very excited about. Okay, let's see if I can go stop sharing and back to the presentation.
Hey, Kelsey, can you make me a presenter, please?
Yep, give me 1 second.
Okay, and see if I have anything else on the next page or if we're on to Q&A. Oh, and I did want to just give, just a quick view of the current invoice, and then the new one is just shows that it's 2 pages. We have gotten some feedback that it would be nice to have a little more space on the invoice if you needed to write something. So we will do that, and we welcome any other feedback. At the top, the account number, which is difficult to see. Oh, we grade it out. But anyway, the account number is the org unit number as well, which Joe mentioned earlier. So you don't have to have a different customer account. And we did use that information to tie it back to, we have crosswalked the new org unit numbers back to your current customer IDs so that we can bring in any open invoices or credit memos or anything into the QuickBooks system so that any invoices that are outstanding when you pay them, we'll be able to apply them in QuickBooks. And I guess now we could just, important dates coming up. Yes, so we are processing invoices for pay period ending 5/29, which is for this payday tomorrow. We're processing those in QuickBooks and in the current system and in doing parallel testing and making any reconciliations there. We have been doing that in our pilot environment for a few months. And then our plan is to go live with invoicing out of the new system on June 26th. Yes, welcome your questions.
At the end of this webinar, there will be an FAQ section in order for you to see all questions that were asked.
Thanks, Kelsey. And if I could just make a closing comment, I just want to thank everybody for participating today. I hope that you have found this to be really helpful and informative. We certainly don't want this to be the last webinar. In fact, we really see a lot of benefit in in communicating with the agencies in this sort of a way, so that again, we can all be on the same page for the purposes of making sure that things like recruitment and onboarding and payroll and timekeeping and billing are all, it's a cohesive, collaborative effort. So we look forward to the opportunity to have more webinars like this, and we just we really appreciate having y'all as customers. We know that if it wasn't for our customers, there would be no need for temporary solutions. So we want to make sure that that we're always in service to y'all. So thank you very much, and I hope y'all have a great rest of the afternoon.